Good morning once again, and welcome back to NewDay here on TV3. We're starting our health club right about now, and with reports that the Ghanaians are spending millions when it comes to the importation of meat products. This morning on our health club, we're asking what is the importance of meat in our diets. We'll begin that discussion just after this video.
There are many who can't eat a meal without having some meat. But did you know that a high intake of meat can pose problems to your health, especially as you get older? At an older age, it may be important to reduce and be mindful of your meat intake. If you want to live longer, trade some of the red meat in your diet for fish, nuts, whole grains, and other healthier protein sources. A study published in the Archives of Internal Medicine found that the risk of dying at an early age from heart disease, cancer, or any other cause rises in step with red meat consumption. Eating too much red meat, which is high in saturated fat and cholesterol, has long been seen as unhealthy, especially for the heart. Studies show that people who eat too much meat are 20% more likely to develop cancer. Meat, however, may also contain high levels of hormones, which can trigger reproductive problems and early onset puberty in children. Your kidneys work to remove excess protein from your body, so eating too much meat can stress them out, leading to kidney damage and even contributing to renal failure in some cases. While eating too much meat can be dangerous, meat is a good source of complete proteins. Your body needs these proteins to maintain cellular tissue, so it's a good idea to eat some meat every day. If you're eating more than the recommended daily allowance of meat, you should probably consider lowering your meat consumption. Serve smaller portions of meat at meals. Eating higher quality cuts of meat in smaller portions can help curb your meat cravings without putting your health at risk. Non-meat protein sources often don't contain as much saturated fat or cholesterol. They often contain healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals that your body needs. While fish and seafood might be considered meats, they don't carry the same risk as to red meat because they are so low in saturated fats and cholesterol.
Okay, so joining me in the studio this morning is Dr. Dennis Boite, a long-standing friend of ours here on NewDay. Good morning, Doc.
Good morning, Benny.
How are you?
I'm great.
Good. Doc, so we live in a culture whereby most of our, associating or socializing is done by sitting down, eating and drinking. Now, when we talk about eating, it's usually your kebabs, your sausages, your meats, or you go to the chop bars, you see people with huge bowls, maybe a small amount of fufu and tons of delicacies around it. I call them delicacies. But what exactly is the human body meant to get from the consumption of red meat?
Meat is important to the body, just like you have other sources of nutrients that the body requires to go through normal daily function. We have red meat, we have meat, other types that are really call it white meat.
Poultry,
for example, is white meat. Basically, what we get from meat is protein. Protein is abundant in meat, and also especially for the one that has red meat, it also has this thing called myoglobin. Myoglobin is a form of protein in the muscle, like the way our blood has hemoglobin.
Right.
That transports blood. It takes it transports oxygen that it gets into the blood.
Yep.
So we have hemoglobin which transports blood. In the same way, for red meat, it also has this myoglobin which also holds on or attaches itself to, or oxygen attaches itself to it, and then it stores oxygen also in the muscle for activity. Right. So what we get from the red meat is the protein as well as myoglobin.
Okay.
Now, it is important that we have this some amount of red meat in our system. That is not to say that we cannot get protein from other sources.
Right.
There are other sources that we can get protein from. Plant protein is extremely important. You can get protein from seafood. You can get protein from nuts. You can get protein from legumes and wheat. You can get protein from some even dairy products, milk and eggs. You can get protein from them. But when it comes to red meat, overconsumption of the red meat is not the best.
Right.
Because as we got from the clip, studies have shown over the time that overconsumption of the red meat has led to people having problems. I mean, if you take a country like Australia, the third commonest form of cancer, which is gastric cancer or bowel cancer, it's because people are consuming too much of
red
meat.
Okay.
But I'll still emphasize that red meat is important, just that you have to have a certain amount of it.
Okay.
So if we're saying that your body needs protein, that is not the only source. Meat is good. So have a bit of the red meat, have a bit of white meat, have a bit of nuts, have a bit of plant sources of protein. But usually when you go to barbecues, you see somebody having the sausage, having the kebab, having all kinds of, and it's just way too much.
Okay.
Now, for our understanding, proteins, basically we are getting proteins from our meat. Proteins are extremely important. It's basically the building blocks of your body. Your muscles would need protein to be able to build up, especially kids who are now growing up. They need a lot of protein. Right. So some amount of red meat in their diet is important because they're now growing up. So you have kids taking in good amounts of this red meat. It helps build their system up. As your cells are growing, old ones are shed off, new ones are replaced. If you don't have enough protein, you cannot. So you are going to be malnourished. Okay. So as you eat this meat, make sure that children have enough of this in their diet. It helps with their growth. And your body also needs enzymes to work. Your digestive system needs enzymes. All these enzymes are protein substances. Your body needs to fight diseases. That's the soldiers of the body, antibodies that your body needs. They are all protein based. You have energy requirements. The daily activities that you do, you exert energy, and that is, you have a store of protein. It helps you to exert yourself. Okay. Now, when you take in protein, the body digests it. It will digest it to what we call finally amino acids, etc. The body will use what it has to use to build your DNA, build your cells, do all that it's supposed to do. If there's excess, the body will store it as a store of energy. When you want to expend it, you expend it. But however, if there is excess of the protein you have eaten, or excess of the meat you have eaten, and therefore the protein, the body cannot, you have that one circulating in your system, and that is where the problem is. Okay. So
that's what leads to the heart disease.
It leads to the problems. So once it's excess in the system, then the body has to store it as in the form of cholesterol, in the form of carbohydrates. Everything eventually gets into glucose, and then it's stored. Okay. Now, when this high, as we say, red meat is high in saturated fats. So once you are consuming so much of it, then you have a lot of cholesterol circulating in your system. And we've talked about this before, that eventually to clog your blood vessels, blood will not flow very well to your heart. Blood will not flow very well to your brain. Eventually, what you are getting is you are getting strokes, and you are getting heart attacks, and eventually become obese. You are also becoming obese. And you are seeing in these days that a lot of young people are getting obese by the day. A lot younger, and you have people under the age of 30 years coming to the hospital with high blood pressure. Somebody 28, blood pressure 170. And it's because we are not taking into cognizance the effect of the things we are eating. Okay. I mean, for me, I think that dietary habits is a discipline. You should know that. I mean, I shouldn't take your tongue would love it. I mean, it's nice when we all eat it, but you need to discipline and say that. Look, I'll take this portion, and I'll take that portion, and take that portion. Okay.
Now, Doc, you mentioned a couple of times digestion. Now, one of the things that has been said about red meat is the fact that it does not digest easily within the human body. Just how long does it take for red meat to digest within the intestines?
Some people say it will take 10 years to digest in the system. I doubt that very much. And basically, when you have something you eat this into your system, the stomach, for example, will take about 4 hours to empty itself. Now, in the stomach, there are enzymes that will digest some kinds of protein and then move it into the small intestine. There are other enzymes there that also work. Now, the danger is when the system is overwhelmed with too too much of a thing.
Okay.
Then sometimes you run into indigestion problems where some of the things may come out not well digested. But it's all because you have overwhelmed the system with too much of what you have taken in.
Okay.
But essentially, everything is supposed to be digested and assimilated as well as it's supposed to be.
Okay.
So the thing is not for us to overwhelm our system with eating too much of the protein.
Everything in moderation.
Yes, I mean in these days we are having young children you have childhood obesity, 10 years, and then they got into puberty already.
Yeah.
Because of eating too much of red meat, and then eventually they become very plumpy. So the body is like that of an adult, and then they are getting to early, and then later on they're giving fertility problems and hormonal imbalance problems. It's extremely important that we just know that we limit the amount of red meat that we are taking. It's extremely important. Okay. It's known that we shouldn't take like more than 70 grams of red meat in a day, or let's say 70 grams of protein in a day. So in that case, you would want to say that, yes, red meat, I need to get the myoglobin from the red meat, it's important. I need to get the necessary proteins from it, it's important. But I think that if you take a slice of bread, and about half of it, if you have that amount of red meat, that's okay. And then you can get other things
from other areas.
Yes.
Now, when would you advise that somebody should not eat red meat? Because obviously it's not going to be great for everyone. I understand that you know everybody needs a certain amount of protein and you can get it from other places. But is there ever a situation where you would advise as a doctor, don't eat red meat? Well,
if you already have cardiovascular problems, if you already have hypertension problems and you have cholesterol problems, the advice would be that it is not good for you. You have to cut down on this amount that you are taking into your system. And basically that, because the research that has shown that gastric cancers and also somebody has kidney problems or you have liver problems. If you have these things, you always advise that you cut down on protein intake, not even just red meat, but even protein intake.
So that would be almost
exactly because when the proteins are digested, eventually, as I said, it turns to amino acid. They are nitrogen based. And so eventually the kidney would have to excrete it out of your system.
Right.
So the urea that you push out, or the urinate, and then therefore is uric acid, all these things that you are expelling. Now they contain a lot of nitrogen. Now, so if you are overwhelming your system with a lot of these proteins, whose breakdown leads to the formation of this amino acid and this nitrogen based thing, you are also overwhelming the kidneys.
Right.
And that we're saying that eventually it can lead to the kidneys failing.
Okay.
And then you can get into renal failure. So it's important that we just regulate the amount of the red meat and the meat proteins we are taking in. Again, especially for those of us who are growing, as I said, for kids, it's important for them to take quite a good amount of protein and red meat. But when we are in our middle ages and getting to in the middle ages, what happens is that when you are trying to excrete proteins out of the system, when you are trying to get all these nitrous things from the system, it also goes to calcium. Sometimes, like this, where interplants go, water flows. Wherever proteins are, or these nitrogen sources are getting out, it always moves. They pull calcium along with them. Right. So eventually, what happens is that you end up having your bones deprived of calcium.
Right.
So you get this also called osteoporosis, and eventually your bones become brittle, and you get to a certain age, and you are breaking your bones, you easily fall, or you have arthritis and all these things coming in. So it's important that we really, really regulate the amount of red meat that we are taking into the body.
Okay, Dr. Botte, I want to thank you so much for educating us more this morning. And for all of you who eat excessive red meat, please cut it down. Everything should be done in moderation as per the doctor's advice.